There we go. Okay. We have a good track record here. Our last community meeting had one sole community participant. David, you've kept us on the same track.
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
But we are recording this. I look forward to we'll look forward to sharing this information with all of our employers and making this recording available. But my name is Todd Schmidt. I'm Waunakee's village administrator. With us on the village end of things is Tim Semin. Tim is the village's community development director, in charge of planning and economic development duties. Tim, you're in what, month 5 or so?
Starting month 5. Yep.
After departing as planning director in Sun Prairie.
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody.
Yep. Oh, good. Jeff, welcome, Jeff. Jeff is with Home Again Senior Living.
Would you like me to introduce myself?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll let no, I'm sorry, Bright Star. There Jeff is with Bright Star Senior Living. Home Again is another new senior living facility in the village. And with us are representatives from the Greater Madison MPO. I'll let them introduce themselves quick, but I'll just let everybody know that we engaged the MPO to help us, to help the village work with our local employers to talk about how transportation may be an element of challenge related to employment circumstances and the challenges that we're all facing in hiring. And our goal has been through survey process to understand the challenges that employers are facing, and then through providing information, sharing with employers in our community about the resources that are available or could be available if we choose to consider taking the step into some program development. So with that, I'll turn it over to our MPO colleagues to introduce themselves and then to take the presentation away.
Great, thank you, Todd. So my name is Zia Brukaya, and I am the round trip program manager with the Greater Madison MPO, and I'll share more details on that program during the presentation, but essentially we are here to assist individuals and employers and communities with transportation demand management, or basically transportation options, and figuring out solutions. So we'll get more into the details, and I'll let Ben introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Ben Lima. I'm a transportation planner with the Greater Madison MPO, and I do primarily transit and specialized transportation for our office. And I do a little bit of bicycle and pedestrian stuff as well, and public outreach and Title VI and public engagement. So I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit about sort of what we think from a very high level might be appropriate sort of methods of approaching transportation provision for your workers in Waunakee. Back to you, Zia.
Okay, yes, thanks for having us today. We are looking forward to the conversation. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here.
And if for those who are representing Waunakee employers, you might not have seen my comment, but for means of introduction, just put in the business you're with, what your role is in the business, and the total number of employees that you currently have on staff.
Yeah, I can go. So again, this is Dave Packard. I'm the HR manager at Nordgear. We're currently around 505 employees, and we've got an additional 70 openings we're looking to add. So it's definitely a big deal for us.
Thanks, David. Happy to do this verbally because it appears that we lost. Is Zia still with us? I don't see her on my screen, so she maybe
looks as though she dropped off.
There she is.
She's back.
She's back.
She's back.
Oh, it's
All right.
great.
All right, Jeff, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Jeff Tews, owner of Bright Star Senior Living, together with my wife and my son. We've got within the Bright Star Senior Living about 50 employees. We're about 20 down from where we ought to be. Managers are really stressed with the amount of work that they're doing. So it's a very difficult time for us in hiring. In our home care part of our business, we've got about 500 employees. And at this point, we could use 600. And that spans across all of southern Wisconsin. So looking for any kind of advantage around hiring, particularly for our direct care staff, aides, cooks, dining assistants type of positions. We can go to the Upper East Side of Madison to recruit, but they over and over tell us they don't have any way to get there because they're mass transit kind of folks, and so we're looking for those other kind of alternatives. And so Zia, I think some of the programs that you've got, I've heard about before. I think we have an opportunity to think about some ride share or Vanpool kind of options for us. So.
Okay, and I hope I pronounced this right. We have Razi with Unique. Unique is one of our larger employers as well. I think not long ago, you guys were up in above 300 employees, weren't you?
Did. We actually did have over 300 employees, but with the, with, I guess, just the reduction in force that we did a few years ago, we went down to maybe 150, and now we've continued to increase closer to 200 right now.
Okay, and how do you pronounce your name? I apologize.
That's okay. It's Rosie.
Rosie. Okay, thanks, Rosie. How many vacancies do you have at the moment that you're recruiting for?
So right now we have at least 5 to 7. Some of them are on hold. We have at least another 5 to 7 on hold, given that, I mean, just like a lot of employers, we're struggling to get our product from the ports and delivered to our location. So I guess all in all, we have around 20 openings.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Rosie, for being here. So with that, Zia, I'll turn it back over to you then to move forward with your presentation.
Okay. Give it another shot here. All right. There we go. Okay, so yes, great to see you all here. We'll go through this presentation, and I think it would be fine. We'll certainly have time for discussion at the end. But if we have such a small group that if you'd like to kind of pop in during the presentation and ask a question, I think that that's fine. So I'm going to start with, I know that Jeff, you were part of the last meeting, so this will be a review for you, but just who we are at the Greater Madison MPO. We are the federally designated metropolitan planning organization for the Madison region. And we basically cover the urbanized area of Dane County and what is set to become urbanized within the next 20 years. We are responsible for cooperative regional transportation planning. We're governed by a 14-member policy board that includes representatives from the organizations that you see here in the graphic. And the round trip program that I manage is a program of the MPO to support transportation, sustainable transportation options. So anything other than driving alone to get where you need to go. And we approve the use of federal funding for transportation projects in the region. And then this shows the region that we cover, which includes Waunakee and then all these other suburban communities in addition to Madison. And it's sometimes hard, for people to fully get what the MPO does, we're really a planning organization, planning and funding. Our primary responsibilities are bringing everyone together in the region to prioritize and coordinate and fund transportation projects. We develop a regional transportation plan every 5 years. And that plan looks ahead 20 to 30 years, and we're actually in the middle of that planning process right now. We have a meeting coming up tomorrow. We collect data, we provide technical assistance to communities. We have lots of data, lots of maps, lots of capabilities available there, approving federal funding for projects, and then managing our round trip program. So we do not design or construct or maintain any transportation facilities. We don't deal with traffic or enforcement, operating public transit. That's all Metro Transit. We don't plan how land is used. But we do work closely with the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, if you're familiar with them. So really quickly, just 2 slides on this. This is the survey that we did in partnership with Todd and Tim at the Village to look at, kind of get some more details from businesses in the region or in the community. So this was done just a couple of months ago now. We sent out 326 invitations, received 28 responses. The majority of respondents were smaller businesses that are planning to add staff over the next 2 years. Over half reported having fewer than 20 employees, so much smaller than you guys here. And nearly 80% had fewer than 50 employees. But everyone's looking to be adding employees over the next couple of years. And then these are some of the key points that we heard. That first and second shifts are experiencing the most attraction and retention issues. Start and end times of the shifts varied widely. We asked respondents to put in what's your start and end time for first, second, and third. And there's actually quite a bit of variation there, which is one of the things that can help with a solution if there are multiple businesses that can sync their shift times so that employees can all come together on Vanpool, for example, and come in at the same time and leave at the same time. Most hiring difficulty was within that $12 to $16 an hour range. Almost 50% said that. The 40% of respondents said that lack of transit access is a challenge. They said most employees are getting to work by a private vehicle right now, whether it's their own or a family member. And then bike and carpool would be the other kind of secondary commute modes. We asked about benefits that businesses would be willing to offer to support employee transportation. So carpool program or assistance was the top one at 37%. That's something that we can certainly talk about with round trip. Coordinator to assist employees, that's always helpful. And then an emergency ride home program, which we do have available. So that is something that can be promoted to employees as already existing in Dane County. And then the transportation options, which Ben will get into right after this, that we'll dig into more today, that respondents were most interested in were the potential for a transit extension, partnerships with companies like Lyft and Uber, and we'll bring local cabs into that. And then we're also adding van pools because we think that could be a really good option in Waunakee. So we'll talk more about that. And then I will hand it over to Ben, but I'll keep running the show.
Excellent, thank you. So we're going to go over each of these kind of in their own right further on here, but just to start things off with a bunch of text for you, the 3 big sort of options that we see for the Waunakee area is one, public transit, which for our purposes, it could be a bus or a van. Clearly, if you've got fewer than 12 people, then probably a van is the more economical and efficient way to move them. And if you have more than that, then operating a bus is probably the more efficient way. But I'm going to use those terms for the most part interchangeably during this presentation. State funding is available for both operations and capital costs if these vehicles are open to the public to be you don't have to work at one particular employer or another, and anybody who wants that ride is able to take it. It could be contracted with Metro or with a private provider. It's generally going to be less costly for the riders because there is that state funding available to help pay the overall costs. And it could possibly be employer sponsored. So a few examples in the region. Epic, obviously a lot bigger than any individual employer in Waunakee, but they do pay for the entire Route 75 that serves Verona. And it's really scheduled around their shift changes and their needs, and they just pay for it through Verona. UW Health pays for, I think it's the 26 that goes to the American Family Center. So another major employer that's basically paying for an entire bus route. And then UW-Madison operates the 80 series on the campus as well. So several different examples of different private employers that are basically providing the bus service for the public, not just for their own employees. There's also private transit, and here we're going to basically be looking at Vanpools. There wouldn't be any state transit funding. There's some possibility for other funds under the WETAP or other economic development programs, but it wouldn't be through the 8520 or 8521 state transit funding. It could be done in-house, so a given business could own its own van, or it could contract out the services. Gives you the flexibility to set your own schedule and contract with the operator of your choice, such as Commute with Enterprise, which offers van pools. Employees in a van pool, a big difference from general transit is that one of your employees is going to be operating that vehicle rather than a professional driver. And so in return for making sure that there's gas in the tank and it gets its usual oil change, they don't have to pay as much for their share of that ride because they're the ones who are taking the responsibility of maintaining the vehicle and driving it. It does tend to be more costly for riders, again, because there's not a public subsidy generally. You could also do a partnership with a taxi company or a transportation network company. That's the TNC there, such as Union Cab, Lyft, or Uber. These could be publicly or privately subsidized. So the Village of Waunakee could kick in some money towards that service. A group of employers could throw in some money towards that. These are often done as a negotiated, reduced, or flat fare area for eligible trips. So if one end of your trip is at a Metro bus stop and the other end is at your employer in Waunakee, then it's an eligible trip. And if you want to go to the airport or go out on the town, go to the Overture Center, that is not a covered trip. So it's fairly easy to set those things up. And this is likely the most costly option depending on ridership. Anytime you're going to have one person in a vehicle, it's going to be more expensive than if you're able to share that ride. Something else to keep in mind, though, is that in transit, the lion's share of the operating cost is the driver. And so it doesn't really make a big difference if the driver is driving a 40-foot bus with 30 plus seats or whether they're driving a 14-passenger van. If they are a Metro driver and they're a Teamster, then they're going to get paid the same no matter what. So that's just something to keep in mind. That said, when your ridership goes up, you're generally going to have lower fares for each person on board in an unsubsidized situation. Go ahead, Tia. All right, so before we get into other transportation stuff, I have to, call it the elephant in the room, the obvious, which is that transportation is a function of land use. If you are in a mixed use building where there's a grocery store on the first floor and offices on the second and third and residences above, you could theoretically live your whole life there and not have to be transported anywhere. On the other hand, if those buildings are all across the street, then or down the street, you're going to need to walk across the street. You're going to need to get to them. And of course, if your house is 10 or 20 miles from your employment, you're going to have to use some other means of transportation to get there. So I just need to come back and say, from the Waunakee Housing Task Force Summary Report, you've already identified that the current housing market in Waunakee does not match up with your workforce. And so by providing more workforce housing in Waunakee, you're reducing the number of people who actually have to be transported to and from Waunakee. So always an important thing to keep in mind. And all right, so I'm going to dive a little bit into sort of what is coming down the pike for transit. I have a huge caveat on this. If you're following at all, the Madison Common Council is set to take up their budget amendments that have been proposed again tonight at 5:30. They did not get to this item last night, but there are some alders who have requested a budget amendment to hold all future funding for the BRT project, design, consultants, all of that, because of the question of the very small section, the 2-block section where BRT is proposed to go down State Street and then around the Capitol. So pending what happens there, well, that it could potentially throw back or put off the schedule for BRT by a year or more. If we don't score as well in FTA review, then maybe we don't get the money at all if it's realigned. So this is a rather major decision point that we all thought we had crossed, but apparently we haven't. We get to revisit it again. So that said, bus rapid transit is really going to be sort of a formative thing for not just the city of Madison, but for the region. Bus rapid transit is considered fixed guideway like rail, even though it runs on rubber tires. There are major station improvements. There's dedicated running ways so that the buses aren't in traffic as much. And so you see that on this map, on the main map, where it's blue, there will be bus lanes in the center running, the center of the roadway. Where it's red, there will be designated bus lanes on the sides. And only in the green sections will the buses be running in mixed traffic. And even there at signals, they'll be able to have transit signal priority or queue jump, where the signal allows them to go before the bulk of the rest of the vehicles, which makes BRT much more competitive in a time way compared to single occupant vehicles and as opposed to regular fixed route buses. And then we have some conceptual local service going out to Middleton, going south. The north-south BRT will be a future phase that'll be coming as well. So next slide, please. I should note that under the current schedule, those buses are scheduled to start operating in August of 2023 with the BRT system planned to fully open in August of 2024 after construction is done. But again, that timeline is at this point highly questionable. So based on our current long-range transportation plan for the region, I've got a map down on the left side here, which is our future transit network that was in that adopted plan. And as you can see, there are a couple of routes that go up to Waunakee and connect both to North Madison and to Middleton. The map on the right, we just went ahead and sort of a potential local service connecting Waunakee to conceptual, the north-south BRT, or in this case, to the north transfer point. It looks as though the north transfer point will probably be removed from the system and the land repurposed for other things. In the current network redesign that we're working on, it just doesn't really serve any purpose with the redesigned network, but no decisions have been made on that yet. So at this point, because we're all familiar with it, be coming back to this route and kind of talking about how long it would take and how many buses it would take to run this based on that north transfer point destination. Obviously, if you want the bus to go further, it will take longer and cost more. And if it gets moved further north, then it'll be a little bit faster and a little bit cheaper. So service funding considerations, Metro estimates that it's $90 to $110 an hour before the 55% state funding reimbursement. So if you want to run a bus for an hour, that's about how much you're going to be paying. And those are the costs that Sun Prairie and Verona are currently paying for their services. A private provider contacted one of the larger contracted service providers that works with both Dane County and with Metro doing paratransit, as well as other operators and Iris and Family Care Transportation. And they said, depending on how it was set up and how it would be billed, it could be $50 to $75 an hour to run the vehicle, or if it was done on a per rider basis, it could be $21 to $38 per rider. So definitely, less expensive than going with Metro. However, the Metro fare is going to be the consistent Metro fare for anybody, and it'll give them transfers and allow them to ride BRT once they get to Madison, and they'll be able to go to Middleton or Verona or Fitchburg or Sun Prairie, and not have to pay again. So it really is a larger service area than just running a bus between the North Transfer Point and Waunakee. The state operating assistance, section 8520, has it's sort of a cumbersome process to get it. It's not a discretionary process though. You just have to go through the steps in the right order. So you must notify WSDOT the calendar year before you want to apply for the funds. It requires showing due diligence in estimating the demand for service. So the employer surveys that you've already started, and then any other future community surveys, outreach, all of that kind of planning work and documentation ends up getting sent to WSDOT, and they're able to then see that you are not saying you want to run a 60-foot articulated double-decker bus that's going to have 3 people on it. They can see that you're actually scaling your service for the demand. After you have done that due diligence and you've notified them that you intend to apply, it's not like you're on the hook. You don't have to continue to apply if you find that it's just not going to make sense. Applications are available in every fall, and then the funding is for the next year. So as an example timeline, if you were to notify WSDOT before the end of December that you intended to apply in 2022, you could then apply in the fall of 2022. And then that would give you operating assistance funding, roughly 50–55% of your operating costs available in 2023. Next slide, thank you. All right, so going back to that route that I showed earlier, there are several different considerations that you'll want to mull over, think, and discuss as a community, and as employers to see what was going to work for you. The first question is service frequency or the number of trips. So for service frequency is also what we call headway. How often does the bus come? Does it come once in the morning or once in the evening? Or does it come every half hour? Does it come every 60 minutes? So that's clearly a very important thing. If the bus only comes once in the morning and once in the afternoon, you better not miss it, because that's your way to work and it's your way home. If it comes every half hour, then you have, and it's over a 3-hour span, so that's the service duration, the next bullet, or all day or shift specific only. So the Route 23 to Sun Prairie currently runs every half hour for 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. And so that would be an example of that service duration, 2–3 hour peak periods. Or do you want it to be an all day, or do you want it just shift specific? So, one vehicle for first shift, one for second, one for third. And that is another important thing we'll come to later, that not only do you need to get people to work, but you need to get them home afterwards. So if the problem was, as identified in the survey, getting first and second shift workers to places of employment, you're going to have to get them home again. So it's not just running a bus to get the first shift people there and a bus to get the second shift people there. That second shift bus can also bring the first shift people home, but you need a third bus to get the second shift people home as well. So it's something to remember. We can't just leave them stranded overnight. Oh, can you go back? There we go. Okay. So another question would be, do you want to do reverse commute only? So in the parlance of transportation planning, the dominant direction of commuting is going to be from Waunakee and other outlying communities into Madison in the morning and then home again in the afternoon. A reverse commute then is going to be bringing employees from Madison out to Waunakee. And so are you just looking to get employees there, or since the bus has to turn around afterwards anyway, would you be looking to include local service to other residents of Waunakee who were trying to get into Madison and serving those trips in both directions? Would you want to be connecting to North Madison and or to Middleton, or maybe to Sun Prairie? Using some of our big data analytics, I've looked, and it does look like Sun Prairie is a relatively major source of employees for the Waunakee area. And so maybe that also warrants looking into a little bit. And then, as I said earlier, from the north transfer point and the park and ride, which is what's shown in the map there, we expect it to be about a 60-minute round trip travel time. We base that on 1.4 times the estimated automobile travel time. And so it ends up being, I think, 57 minutes, which is just enough time for, and the light cycle to be a little bit slower once and still give, potentially the driver time to use the restroom and not get too far off the schedule. So if you wanted to have a bus doing this trip every 30 minutes, you actually need 2 vehicles to do that, because it's going to take each an hour to do the full loop. And all right, so I was asked to do some back of the napkin service planning, just to kind of give an idea of what might be involved here. Luckily, you guys have somebody really great at the helm. Tim went through this process with Sun Prairie, so he's probably painfully aware that it's not ever as simple as you would like it to be. But at least he's got some skills and some experience with this. So the 2 different types of service that I put out here. The first is what I'm going to call useful transit service. If I need to go somewhere, and the bus only comes once an hour, then I'm either going to have to leave very early to get where I'm going, or I'm going to arrive where I'm going much earlier than I wanted to, or both. And generally speaking, I'm going to be wasting at least an hour of my time in both directions, waiting for that bus coming or going. I get off work at 4, but the bus doesn't come till 4:30. I've just lost a half an hour. I have to start at 8, but the bus will either get me there at 7:30 or at 8:30. I just lost another half an hour in the morning. So for useful transit service, you'd need 2 vehicles, half-hour service frequency, and in discussing it among staff, we thought that 2 90-minute long peak periods, so half the service that Sun Prairie has, would make sense. So basically a bus every half hour between 7:30 and 9, and then again between 4:30 and 6. Again, this assumes that Waunakee employers are able to and willing to adjust shift times so that they correspond a bit better with each other. Because if there's one employer that is starting shifts at 15 after, or 8:15, and another's at 8:45, and another's at 9, another's at 9:30, it's going to get a lot more difficult to run that efficiently. That would add up to 6 service hours per day, or just over 1,500 service hours a year. Looking at the operational costs of either hiring Metro or a private provider to do it, the range kind of breaks down to between $39,000 and $86,000 a year just in operations, and that's the local cost after the state reimbursement of that 50 to 55%. You'd still have to deal with capital vehicle costs if you were purchasing the vehicles directly. Sun Prairie is essentially buying a BRT bus for the BRT system, because it's going to take an extra bus in the system to be able to add that length of that travel time and still have the buses cycle correctly. So although Sun Prairie won't own the vehicle, they are purchasing a 60-foot long electric articulated bus and installing charging location at their park and ride. And then, of course, other stop infrastructure would be additional. If you're just pulling up to a stop at a business and pulling into the parking lot, no big deal. If you're looking at curbside stops, then all of a sudden you're going to have, ADA compliant level boarding platforms and an ADA route to and from the platforms, and signage, and maybe a bench or a shelter and everything else that goes along with that. Minimal service, on the other hand, where we have just one vehicle and that's doing only shift change service. So again, that would require, if we're trying to serve both first and second shift, it would still require 3 trips to get those folks to work in the morning and home in the evening, from whatever perspective of their shift morning and evening is. And so there you're going to have about 3 service hours daily, again, for that 1 hour round trip to the north transfer point. with a note that if you were doing that in the middle of the night, Metro's not running. And I don't think that people are really going to find it terribly helpful to get dropped off at the North Transfer Point where there's really no services anywhere near, no transit. It's not a very densely developed area. So you may have to come up with a longer route to get folks home on that one. That adds up to just over 1,000 service hours a year. Operations, because they would not, this is not really going to work well with Metro or as public transit. So the operations costs are actually a bit higher. Although looking at it, I may not have removed the 50% state subsidy from that one. I apologize. This is why I'm not an engineer. Sometimes I forget a step in the math. So in any case, it's not a huge insurmountable amount of money, but certainly, it's more than probably any one business owner wants to try and contribute for the good of the community. Other considerations, contracting for minimal service would probably be difficult. Drivers hate split shifts, and I don't know how many people would really want to come in and do, get the vehicle ready and then drive for an hour and then go home for a few hours and then come back and do their vehicle check again and then drive for an hour. It could be tricky, but you might be able to work with a private provider and work something out. And likely employers would need to be flexible with their start and end times to allow riders to transition between bus and van and work if it was shift change service only. So again, even if everything's timed really well and that van pulls in at 8:56 and shift starts at 9, you're either now going to be paying the driver to sit there for 15 minutes while the people who are finishing the last shift come out and then people transition. It makes it more difficult. If the bus comes every half hour, people can plan ahead and they get to work 15 minutes early. It's time to change their clothes, get clocked in, put away their lunch, whatever. One bus per shift change, going to be a little bit trickier from an operation standpoint, just of how do those employees manage to make that transition. Next slide, please, Zia. All right, so just as sort of an example of the timeline, Tim's probably seen this slide before. Sun Prairie laid the groundwork for commuter bus service for years. So, first sort of beginning to talk about getting bus service in 2016, at least seriously, creating an ad hoc steering committee on transportation. It was late 2017 or early 2018 when they actually requested that MPO and Metro develop different transit recommendations. And then there was a planning grant and then the survey. And then lo and behold, Metro ended up having a bus become available because MMSD was reducing their school Dodger service, and Metro could have gotten rid of the bus or they offered it to Sun Prairie. And so luckily they had enough vehicles right then to just make that happen. Otherwise, it probably would have taken another year or two with the purchase of the vehicles to make it come online. And then August of 2019, the service actually began. Next slide, please. All right, so for implementation, you've already started the surveys of employees and surveys of business managers and owners. Just keep working on that and trying to refine that. Service and needs analysis. So once you have an idea of how many people, how many locations, what kind of timeline, starting to identify appropriate services and programs, figuring out your infrastructure improvements and funding. So as I said, for bus stops, you have to have an ADA accessible route and pad. You're going to need signage, other amenities. I think it was a bit of a surprise in Sun Prairie when they realized that in order to have bus stops, they had to change the parking ordinance to make it so that they could prohibit you from parking at the curb where bus stops were. And so, there can be these unexpected wrinkles that you need to be aware of that can slow the process down. Nothing insurmountable, but certainly an extra wrinkle that you need to be aware of. Again, for operational funding, there is state operating assistance. That's about half of the funding, as long as you go through that 3 calendar year process. And then if you're using any public funds, then contracting with a private provider will require a public or competitive solicitation process. Contracting with Metro is different. It would be intergovernmental agreement, but you don't have to do a competitive process because they are the transit provider in the region. And so it's a little bit different for them. Next slide, please.
Hey, Ben, and we have about 20 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we have time for.
Yeah, I'm going to try and book through here. All right, so employee van pools, the state van pools shown there. So an in-house example, so basically the employers would purchase the vehicles, pay for the maintenance and provide the parking. The rider pays a fare calculated to cover the overhead, operating and capital costs. Van is driven by an employee who takes care of, again, the oil changes and the air in the tires, and they get free or reduced fare. And then it could also be contracted. And so an example that's just entering the Madison market is Commute with Enterprise. They're open to doing pilot projects. Employers can subsidize them. It helps connect coworkers who live near each other. They have their own kind of app and program for that. It's a turnkey vehicle. They take care of the maintenance and all of that. They do require at least 4 people per vehicle. And there's a ballpark cost of between $125 and $275 a month per person, depending on, again, how many people are in the vehicle and what the vehicle is. And then on top of the Dane County Emergency Ride Home Program, Enterprise also offers 1 free emergency ride home per person per quarter. And just some screenshots of the Commute with Enterprise information there. Finally, taxi and TNC partnerships. Again, these can be publicly or privately subsidized. It can be tied to a particular trip origins and destinations. And local taxi companies and TNCs offer business accounts to schedule, track, pay, often with flat rate options. So all of these, Zoology Green Cab, Union Cab, Lyft, and Uber are all capable of doing that. And back to Zia.
Okay, and then I will walk us through the round trip program. So we're again here as a resource. We work with individuals, employers, and government entities, and we work with all these different partners that you see logos for here. So big picture, individual assistance, the 2 main things that we provide are the Round Trip Greater Madison website. And so this is an opportunity where this is where individuals go on the site, put in where they live, where they work, what their shift time is, and search for a match. And the matching includes carpools, state van pools, but there's not a state, the state van pools make sense for people coming into Madison. Metro transit routes and park and rides and bike buddies. So really the carpooling for Waunakee is what's going to make the most sense. And there is the opportunity to have a customized kind of branded sign up page with an employer's logo on it. So if you're interested in promoting this to existing or potential new employees, you can get kind of a custom URL that you would share. And then when people click on it, it takes them to a page with your logo. And they have the option to search only within their workplace if they want to do that. That obviously makes the most sense for workplaces with a large number of employees. So the most options for matching.
Zia, can I jump in for a moment? This is Tim.
Yep.
Is there a cost to that, or is that something MPO would provide?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a free platform. It's funded by us and the Wisconsin DOT.
Thank you.
So, and it is, we manage it here locally in Dane County, but it is a statewide platform. So the database includes people coming from all around the state. And then the Emergency Ride Home program, that's funded by Dane County. That's something that people can sign up for on Round Trip. And essentially, if you're commuting, not by driving alone, so you don't have your personal vehicle at work, it provides participants up to 6 taxi rides home per year, and the vouchers are good for up to $75. So that should be able to get people anywhere to and from anywhere in Dane County. And then on the employer side, we're really here to provide support and technical assistance. So if an employer is interested in developing kind of a commute solutions program or doing any one piece of this, like employee surveying or kind of a site assessment to look at, opportunities to support bicycling and walking, where you are in relationship to things like Metro Transit, which obviously, we see that that's a challenge here. But third-party connections, so Commute with Enterprise, we work really closely with them and we can provide connections to them and other providers. And then just program planning, incentives and things like that. We can provide marketing materials. Like I mentioned, the customized round trip page, that's for employers who are really going to promote it to employees. And then we can also come attend either virtual or in-person brown bags and fairs to talk with employees more about the options. And then we do have an e-newsletter that has kind of been on hold this year, but we'll be starting that back up in 2022. That's information and resources for employers. So basically, I mean, the things that we always tell employers at the beginning is, we've started with this survey, the survey of employers in Waunakee. We encourage employers to then start with survey on site, so that, because we really need to understand from employees and also insights from HR staff, and even, in your interviews and your exit interviews, are you gathering information about what transportation challenges people were facing? But from an employee survey, we can learn, how are employees really getting to work? What are their biggest challenges? If something like a Vanpool program were available, would they be interested in it? And then we can go from there to advise, what the specific solutions might be. One thing you can do immediately is advertising round trip and promoting the carpool matching among individuals at the workplace. And then the emergency ride home program for anyone who's currently commuting by carpool or bicycle to your workplace. And so then I'm the contact for any of that. So if you're interested in talking more or interested in some materials, you can reach out to me. And that's what we have. And then we're just really interested to hear questions, comments, reactions, thoughts, anything from you guys. And I will stop the share so that I'll leave this up for a second if anyone's taking this down. But actually, I think Todd, you and Tim can send this out too. So I'll go ahead.
Yeah, and as a reminder, we are recording this, and we'll be sending out the recording link for all the employers in the community to follow up or take a peek at it. So any questions from anyone?
I've got another question. So this is for Zia or Ben. Do you know, well, start back up a little bit. County M is scheduled for reconstruction in the next couple of years. Given the degree of environmental constraints along that corridor and associated developable land, do you know if fixed route stops are being planned into that infrastructure?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
That's the last that I heard from, Wichita in the county regarding that. It did include the pullouts to accommodate future transit.
Okay.
So really, I mean, as we were talking about, workforce transportation opportunities in Waunakee today, I mean, as Ben, the reason why Ben went through a lot of that detail with transit was to illustrate that it's, public transit is always a good thing, but it's a very long-term, extensive process, and it is costly. And we know that employers are dealing with challenges today. So it's kind of like, while transit is something that's being planned, options today, the van pooling, Commute with Enterprise can be a really good that might be a really good opportunity, especially if multiple employers were to be working together to sync shift times and, develop a program. And then the carpooling is something that's immediately available, but that's very much dependent upon individuals finding each other and the promotion on the part of employers. So, if you guys have thoughts or questions about those two options, especially.
Yeah, this is Jeff, and our force that works the evening and the overnight shifts is only 3 or 4 people at a time at those, depending on which one of those you're talking about. If those throw a dining assistant in there, it might be 5. So it really limits those kind of opportunities for van share. Having us purchase a van and have a driver or someone driving to pick people up, 4 or 5 people around the metro area is not a cost-effective thing either for us. So we're starting to sort out that the public, the Uber, cabs, Lyft options may be the best one for us to offer. So I think I'd like to try to figure out how do I put a cost with that? Because I might only have one person for shift that doesn't have a car, so it would give that kind of flexibility, or it would cut down on those number of call-offs we get when I say my car won't start in the winter. And having an option for that. Is that a flexible enough plan to operate with something like that you might use them and then you wouldn't need them for a week? Somebody, you've got somebody scheduled, or you won't need them for a certain shift. Is there a volume amount or any kind of consistent qualification?
That's a good question. I don't know for sure. I don't know if Ben does, but my inclination would be that you would not. We work with Union Cab for the emergency ride home program. And I think that Union Cab, they want to be flexible with employers. So I don't believe that they would require any kind of number of rides per week. They have a cost calculator on their website. It's worth just reaching out and talking to them. But a one-way trip from the north transfer point to Hellenbrand Glass, which was just what we chose, was $30. Now that's a calculator before there's any kind of agreement in place and contract. You could bring that down, but that would be the starting point for a one-way.
And do you need to be involved at all in that, or is that something us just contacting Union Cab, for example, and negotiating that?
Yep, just you contacting Union Cab.
Okay, so there isn't any code or anything I need to say this is part of your program or anything?
No.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. Certainly if you were to contract with First Student, who operates Monona Lyft and Monona Express, or with somebody like Transit Solutions or Abbey Van or Badger Bus, who do paratransit and other contracted things, you'd need to ascertain with each individual company kind of what their flexibility would be. I think because they do a lot of paratransit, which are just calls that are have to be reserved 24 hours in advance, I think that Abbey and Badger and Transit Solutions could all accommodate that, but I can't speak for them. And certainly the taxi companies and Lyft and Uber, you don't need that 24-hour advance notice, so it could be much more flexible. It seems like something, if you had that agreement already in place, where for rides between certain so we call them like geo sheds. So one end of your trip is in the Waunakee Business Park or at your particular place of business, and then the other is at their home or at a metro stop and not at the bar and not at the airport. Then you're able to say, we'll kick in $10 towards the ride. or you have a negotiated price so that they're, as a rider, paying a little bit less. And then if it's just one person in the vehicle, then that's the price that it is. But hopefully you're able to negotiate so that the price doesn't go up with additional passengers.
Sure.
That it's the vehicle and it's the driver's time and it's the gas. And so it really shouldn't matter if a van has one person or 8 people in it, as long as they're all picked up at the same location at the same time. That should be something that they can just operate. So it is much more scalable that way. But it's just something you'd want to discuss with them when you were negotiating those contracts and those agreements. And then ultimately, you give a code to the employee, and they punch it into the app for Lyft or Uber or Union Cab or Zoology Green Cab. They all have business account spots where you can do that. And then bam, that code just goes right into the system and the fare is set.
Okay. And that contract can be detailed enough to say, we're not giving anybody a ride to Poinet or Portage or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's very common to geofence those.
Mhm. Okay.
Quick note, I do apologize. I have a 4:30 meeting to jump to, but I'll transfer host duties over to Tim, and I certainly don't want to cut off productive conversation here if there are more questions. So thank you everybody for participating, and we'll certainly remain connected in our continued process here.
Thanks, Ted.
Thanks, Zia. Thanks, Ben.
It's something to keep in mind too with the van pooling option is that, it's something that could, if there's another employer that is also, has third shift employees that need to get there. I mean, it's something that can be shared. So if you have 1 or 2, but then there's another employer that has 1 or 2, I think, there's a way to figure that out. And what's nice about them is that they can provide smaller vehicles. So the fact that they said it's a minimum of 4 people per vehicle instead of like the state van pool program where the state operates it and they have those really big vans, their minimum to make it viable is like 8. So I think in this case, they are a nice flexible, and there might be challenges if there's a lot of turnover at that shift time, but I think that's something that they have dealt with around the nation, and they can kind of talk through that. But it might be, that could be a good option too.
Obviously, you can tell by the attendance at the last call and the attendance on this call, it's difficult to get, for some reason, it's difficult to get Waunakee businesses excited about talking about these options. So maybe it's just a few of us that have this kind of issue.
Yeah, I think there were, I don't remember the percent, it was about maybe 20%. There was a good amount of businesses that said they were interested in connecting with others, but it wasn't a majority, in the survey. So, or maybe 8 to 10. Yeah.
As you noted, Jeff, that so many employers right now, managers are underwater. You're lacking staff. You're just struggling just to get the job done. Yeah. And a lot of companies just may not have the bandwidth to be able to send someone to participate in a meeting like this. So it'll be up to you to tell your compatriot business owners that there are options, and if you work together, that you might be able to get some more employees up there.
Yeah. I may start a campaign just starting in the industrial park and knocking on doors. The other side of that the equation that I would offer is that we're all so short of employees that if it's an incentive to be able to have people choose to work for you rather than somebody else, to have some type of assistance with transportation, I would think it's the reason why I'm here. We're just having trouble finding employees.
Yeah.
So on a related note, Zia just sent me something earlier today about the IRS has expanded the allowance for basically tax-free commuter benefits
Oh,
for transit users. And so that's something that can either be, paid for by, I think it needs, you I think might know more about this than I do, but the employer needs to be set up with the IRS to basically participate in this program. But then just like a health savings account or a dependent care account, you can have funds taken pre-tax out of the employee's paycheck to pay for their transit pass. Or the employer can, or Vanpool, right? And then, the employer could also offer that benefit as a tax-free benefit to those employees. So
sure.
there are some other financial carrots out there to help make it viable.
Yep, it'll be $280 a month starting in 22.
And Jeff, we'll be talking about this a little bit at our CDA meeting. So obviously for some of those on the call, we know that there's a direct relationship between housing and transportation. So as part of my report on Tuesday night, we're going to certainly let people know that this will be posted, this presentation posted to the website, and then of the round trip program and some of the other information here. So.
And I'm happy to send a flyer, for round trip if you think that that's something that would be useful to send out to employees or post anywhere. I'm happy to do that. And yeah, we're here. So please reach out if you have any other questions.
Okay.
Or need more information.
Great. Well, thanks to both of you, and Tim, for you and Todd continuing to keep this torch burning.
Yeah, absolutely. Rosie, anything to add or questions, comments?
No, I guess, back to what Jeff said, and also Ben, is that, a lot of us are struggling to find people, and of course, once you find them, it's difficult at times too to actually keep them. One of the things that we struggle, of course, is finding the people, but, sometimes, when we're working with an agency, one of their issues that a lot of candidates have is that they don't have the transportation to get to and from Waunakee. Whether it's through a friend or whether it's through, the carpooling. And of course, we don't have any bus transportation going out there right now. So, our thing would be is, how do we, how do we reach those candidates to kind of say, hey, there's this carpooling that, could be a benefit, if you were to come and, work for us, how, I guess that's the big question that we have, we don't have the candidates, so we can't really, ask them, hey, there's this option, or we have this other option as well. But I do want to get some more information. I know that Unique used to have carpooling. We used to obviously reward those employees for for carpooling our other employees. That was pre-COVID, of course. But now, hopefully that we're getting to a point where we're a lot of us being vaccinated and whatnot, but hopefully we can restart that program once again. I know that you mentioned, Zia, that we can find some information regarding that on a particular website. Are you able to share that website with me so I can start looking into this, and maybe any information that we can distribute or even post during our job openings, because that could be something that we could advertise as far as, hey, carpool is available and whatnot. So
yep. So I just posted, it's roundtripgreatermadison.org.
okay.
So you can look around on there. We have information about the emergency ride home program that you can access, but the flyer that I just mentioned is something that we just finished up, so I could send that maybe to Tim separately to get to others. We don't have that posted yet. And then, yeah, I mean, one of the things, you know, we at Round Trip, we're very often contacted by people who are struggling to find transportation for second and third shifts. And it's really hard. You know, it's frustrating and challenging because, you know, we see all these people kind of all around that are struggling, but yet they are also struggling to find a connection because it's the second and third shift and it's not that kind of regular 9 to 5. And so I think, you know, right now we just want to be getting as many people as possible onto the platform and saying, you may not find a match right now, but there are a lot of people who are looking. And the more that you know, once a person signs up and says, here's my commute and I'm looking for a carpool and I'm active for matching, even if they don't find a match right away, Ben could sign up a week later with the same commute interest. And the first person will then receive a notification saying, hey, you have a new match now, because now someone else is online. So, you know, it's a matter of getting that critical mass. So that's definitely one. And then just kind of starting that conversation at your workplace. You know, it sounds like you guys already are talking about it a little bit, and maybe there are current employees who really, you know, would be interested in carpooling or van pooling. And so kind of that's where the employer survey or employee survey would come in to help to understand, okay, actually we have 10 people that would really like to van pool if there was an option. And so then that's something to work with. So it's a challenge for sure, but I think, you know, just taking the first steps to get started, get people on the website and understand what people are interested in and what their barriers are good places to start. And I'll send that flyer to Tim after this.
Perfect. Thank you. No, thank you all for the information. I kind of, you know, agree with Jeff. It's, you know, it's unfortunate that we didn't have a lot of employers from the Waunakee area. You know, I'm not quite sure how many responded, but from what I saw, not very many employers responded from the Waunakee area. So it's, you know, we all tend to to complain and say that we don't have the transportation or can't find people, but, you know, it does take, you know, a little bit of our part to kind of, you know, get that started, get that conversation going. But thank you all.
Thanks for
Yes,
attending,
thank
Rosie,
you, Rosie.
and we'll definitely keep the conversation going and continue working with the MPO and Zia and Ben on trying to provide some solutions. So,
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good one.
all right,
Thanks.
Zia
All
and
right.
Ben, thanks very much for all the work you did on this. Bye, Rosie. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks very much for putting together everything on this. Much appreciated.
Definitely. Thanks, Tim.
So, all right. Well,
We'll
more to
stay in
come.
touch.
You bet. Have a good day.
Yep. Okay,
We'll see ya.
take care. Bye.